Okay, so we already heard about women in business and society. We heard about the city of the future and technologies, and I suppose I'm a woman and I have a very typical job in that respect because I'm a landscape architect. And landscape, that's usually something that people think of as something quite romantic. If people ask you, what are you actually doing as a landscape architect? Often I go to the taxi, they ask me, what are you doing? I say landscape, they say, oh, how beautiful! Oh, you must design all these beautiful parks and gardens, botanic gardens. People imagine these kind of flowery landscapes. And this is actually when you're working in the job and in the reality, this is also what the clients actually wish you to do. They want you to create this beautiful flowery tree landscape. This is also a future of the city project in China, and as you see, it looks totally harmonious, everything is green, you see the blue river flying by with some balloons in the sky. And as a landscape architect, you are helping architects and engineers to create this dream of the green city. And everybody, also the investors, they are really looking for this image of the paradise, the lake paradise, the green paradise, something ecological. And as a landscape architect, you help them to realize this dream of creating the lake paradise. You create all these ponds, you create the promenades, you plant the trees, you do the lawns. And of course, in terms of space, looking at creating a nice space, and also for the people who live here, it's something really beautiful. But what I came to realize after working on such kind of projects, especially in big megacities like in China, this was actually a project that I did in Beijing, and after going there and experiencing, looking a bit outside this bubble of the investors and the people's dream of the lake paradise and seeing what actually happens right next to it, where you have all these lawns and lakes, and then you move forward and you see this river, which is actually one of the main rivers in Beijing, and on the whole length passing by Beijing, there's not even a single drop of water in this river because it's totally diverted to serve the city for drinking water, going a lot of water for irrigation, and then in the end it's passing through the water treatment plant, and then you find some little drops of water. And also the groundwater table sinks every year by 1 meter in Beijing. And so it's really this controversy. Also, as a landscape architect, you are helping people to realize the dream of the lake paradise. But what you're actually creating by this kind of landscape design is that you're creating deserts, because Beijing is losing water, you are destroying the environment. And this is really a dilemma within the profession. People want you to do something beautiful, but also, of course, landscape, it should be about the environment, and how to really bridge this dilemma in the profession. Because working in all kinds of different environments, I've had projects in China, now we're working in Lima in Peru, and we have all these totally different natural landscapes that are either really humid, you see water everywhere in the landscape, or really dry, like in Lima. But then you drive with your car, you come into the city, and actually you see the same image of parks, of landscapes everywhere in the world. And we've had a conference and we've had people guessing, can you guess where this actually is? Is it in a desert? Is it in a wetland? But actually the landscape types, the grasses, the kind of plants and trees that are planted, they are really almost the identical even types that you find all over the world, because they are very adaptive, they just need enough irrigation, they can withstand a lot of different temperatures. So this also makes you lose the feeling where you actually are, because cities in the world start looking all the same, but actually the resources needed to create this kind of false paradises, they are immense. And so you create a lot of problems, on the other hand, due to this kind of treatment, because you create droughts. On the other hand, by taking out the water might destroy the dikes and you create the floods again. You create problems of waste. As a landscape architect, we tend to say, this is the engineer's problem. This is not of what we should deal with. This is really technical, and actually studying landscape architecture, it's usually 70% women, because we believe like, it's not so technical, we don't have to learn all these things about these engineering stuff. Let's leave these issues to the engineers. We just deal with the beautiful landscapes. And this for me was always a difficult position, because I found it really hard to kind of take that out of my head and just forget about it, because of course all these cities that are now, we already heard this phenomenon of people moving into the cities, and all of these people want to have a lake paradise. But how can we create this, and how can we guarantee people to access these kind of environments? And if we do this, don't we then really destroy what we need? And with landscape, it's very difficult, because this is something that it's in people's minds, what it should look like. It should have this kind of lawns and trees. But how can we develop different responses to this dream of the lake paradise, and how to create it in the city? And for that, I've worked with different colleagues all over the world to find and identify new strategies, to work on projects by myself, but also to do research. And it really needs a new way of thinking of landscapes. And this is also why I gave this talk the topic of extreme landscapes, because I would like people to think the extreme opposite of what they usually think what a landscape should be. Usually people think that when you want to design a park, this park should be protected from the flood, because the flood is considered as something bad that might destroy the city, that might destroy the park. Also, usually if you create a water feature in a park, you add fish, you add a lot of artificial treatment that actually pollutes the water but makes it look blue or green. Sometimes in America they even add colors to the water just to make people feel they are in a blue lagoon. So this is actually polluting the water to create this image of the lake paradise. Also, usually when you develop a city, when you build a park, you take away the land that was used in a productive way before, that was used as agricultural land, you replace it by something that needs a high maintenance cost and that is not productive anymore. And also, usually when you build a park, you rely on irrigation, which is usually done by drinking water, which of course puts a huge stress on the water table. And these are usually the characteristics of what people think, okay, all these things we accept if we want to have a lake paradise. But isn't it possible to just really think the opposite way? To design a park that really accepts the flood, that even invites the flood as an experience for people to have as part of the experience of a park that can purify the water and become a water purification machine rather than polluting the water, that actually grows food as part of the park design, and that also saves and recycles water as part of the experience of the park. And most people cannot imagine these things, but actually it's not that difficult, and I want to show you a few examples for each of these 4 topics to show you what it could look like. The topic of keeping out the flood, this is a picture I like. It's in Hamburg. I live in Hamburg, and there are a lot of locations, Elbblick, the view to the Elbe, but to protect the city and also to protect like the walkways, the dikes have to be built higher with the rising sea level every several years. And so actually what's disappearing is the view to the river Elbe. And the people just build their fences, but they lose what they want to have, which is the lake paradise. So I think there's no other way than finding new ways of overcoming this division and thinking of how to combine the flood. And this is quite an interesting approach in the city of Hamburg, which is also unique in the world, because the main levee that protects the city was a barrier where it was not allowed to put any residential district in front of it, because it then is of course not protected from the flood. But when the city wanted to develop this Hafen city, of course the special thing about this site is that it has the connection with the water. And in the beginning they thought they should shift the levee to protect the whole site, but then the people would not have been able to see anymore the water and the ships going past. So they actually had to change the concept, and they had to even change the regulations to build an urban fabric and also an open space that can actually deal with changing water levels in different times. So when it's the low tide, the water table is very low, and it shifts like this because we have a 3.5 meters difference in low tide and high tide. And the former level of the harbor is not actually safe from the storm surge. But they decided to build wharfs on top of this former level to keep it as a promenade, as a level of open space that can then actually get completely flooded. So this walkway here actually can accept the flood. It's built from materials that are permanent, The buildings are built like on the Halligen that we can find in the North Sea on small wharfs, and these are actually also connected by emergency routes and by walkways, so that people, even when there's a storm surge, they can still go around here. And this whole open space, all the parks, all the promenades, that is actually what the landscape architects did. All this is designed to accept the flood, be flood-proof, and at the same time make people to be able going down to the water. And this is the largest example in the world where a new city area was actually built without any flood protection, and it's a very new concept. The second one is a case study which is about thinking of an urban park, not like this. You have a lot of fish here, a lot of geese, people put food into the water. You even take the people out of the water by building a fence to protect them from the water. And this is a project which was part of the expo in Shanghai, and a good friend of mine built this. This is to show people that a park can actually contribute to even making the water quality of the adjacent river better by pumping up the water from the river, which is actually quite dirty. This is the Huangpu River in Shanghai, taking it to an upper basin and having it filter through different wetland systems and basins to, in the end, at the end of the park, come out and be purified. And this actually looks like this. This is the basin taking up the dirty water, taking this into a very long wall where the water then goes down by gravity, goes through this filter, which is a gravel filter that's planted with plants that can actually that are growing in humid conditions. And then it flows through these basins, and as you can see, the kind of image of the park, in contrast to this very modern city of Shanghai, it looks very different from the normal parks that have the kind of lawns and planted trees, because this is actually a water treatment plant. This park this is like the aeration that you also find in a water treatment plant, but this is designed for people to experience the process of purifying the water, enjoying the water, celebrating the water, and also seeing the process of the water color changing and explaining this process and making this part of the park experience. The next example, this is a picture I took from a project I was involved in, where I was really shocked that this cultural landscape here with apple trees, it was fully covered, taking down the mountains, destroying this valley to build the city on top of this flattened area. So it's very normal process that the agricultural land just gets replaced by this urban land use. And this was also the case with this project, also by my same Chinese friend, who was invited to design a campus in Shenyang in China. And like usual for landscape architects, the budget was diminished because the cost of construction was rising, and also there was hardly any time left. And what he decided then was, because this used to be agricultural land with a very famous kind of rice that is also special for this area, and he decided to incorporate this idea of using the rice instead of the grass, make this the plant that actually gives the ground cover, and also incorporate the kind of cycles of harvesting, of experience, the growth of the rice into the calendar of the university. So within the academic year, there is a celebration of planting the rice where the students get involved, and then at the end of the academic calendar, it's also a feast for harvesting the rice, and it's about this connection with the landscape, with the changing also appearances, that in the winter this looks very different, of course, than from the summer. And also it's even sold as a kind of branding from the university to bring this rice as a special gift when you go traveling to advertise your civil engineering university by having this very special landscape design that, by the way, was also a lot more cheap than having this other design that was originally proposed. The last topic about the consuming and wasting of water, this is a picture that I just came back from Lima last week, where I was with a group of students, and all around the city you find these water trucks that use drinking water, although a lot of people in the informal areas don't even have any connection to the water network, only to water these green areas alongside the streets. And we were working in an area which is looks like this, where the people don't even have any connection to the drinking water pipes. They also get the drinking water from the same wagons, and they actually pay more for the water than the people who are actually connected to the network. And so it's really about saving water, because water is expensive, and the people here, of course, they cannot use the drinking water for watering their green, and they don't even have any green. But at the same time, they throw out their the water that they use for washing the dishes, for doing the washing of their clothes. They just throw it out. There's no drainage system. They throw it to the streets. And this is a concept diagram developed by one group of the students, because we worked with the local people and we asked them, why you just throw out the water to the street? Why you can't use this to also create a garden as part of your house, and have a system that the students then invented together with the inhabitants to firstly put the water into a small sieve that keeps the solids, which is used then to create a compost. And then the water from this tank goes through these bottles, which are recycled bottles. These people here, they are working as recyclers. That's their job. And then waters several trees that are planted to create like a small veranda in front of their house. And this was what the students did together with these people in 1 week. This is only the work of one group. And the family who lived here, they were really proud, and all the neighbors came and saw their front yard. And this is really about taking care about, if you have very little resources, how to make the best use of it, and how to also combine that with recycling of the water, and also the recycling of materials that you already have in this area. So for me, as a landscape architect, when I'm only associated with, you are doing all these beautiful things, it's something that I'm not so proud of. But I'm more proud of if people are really surprised that I'm working with engineers, that we are designing these landscapes that can actually produce something that can deal with the challenges, and that the landscape is not only something beautiful, but it's the landscape that becomes part of the infrastructure system of the city, that it is not something that you can only afford to have and something luxury, but it is something that's really needed and that's integrated into the cycles, just like the mobility. And it's not only something to see, but something to actively work with and become a productive interaction between our natural environment and the people and the space that we use and create. And this, for me, is the challenge of being a landscape architect. And of course, this work only works in interdisciplinary team, and this is what we are trying to do in our different projects. So this is what I also wanted to share with you, because it's more like a kind of extreme experience. People sometimes feel it's weird getting into these topics. You're working with rainwater, you're working with even wastewater, that's disgusting. But once you start thinking about it, how to see the beauty in these things, then it becomes a really big desire and a big fun to work in this way. Thank you.